doing? So recently I got a request asking if I could do a tutorial for a spaghetti strap tank top, so that's exactly what I'm going to show you today. You can make the straps as thin or as thick as you'd like, and this is going to be a super easy tutorial to make. I used a really lightweight non-stretch fabric for this kind of a looser effect, but you can use a stretch fabric, especially if you want a more fitted effect. It's going to be the same exact tutorial either way. I really hope y'all enjoy this one. It's going to be a quick one to sew and very easy, and you get a cute tank top for the summer. So let's go ahead and get sewing. To make this top, I used 3/4 of a yard of a lightweight non-stretch fabric I found in the remnants section, although a stretch fabric would also work, and about 2.5 yards of double fold bias tape. I used 1/2-inch thick bias tape, but if you wanted thinner straps, you could get 1/4-inch thick bias tape. And finally, you'll need a well-fitting spaghetti strap tank top with a neckline similar to this for a template. Begin by folding the spaghetti straps down out of the way, and then fold the tank top in half down the center. Fold a portion of your fabric over a bit larger than your tank top, and since I'm using a non-stretch fabric, it doesn't matter which way I fold it, but if you're using a stretch fabric, you'll want it to stretch this way. Lay the tank top template down onto the fabric so that the folds line up and pin it into place. Start cutting by following right along the shape of the curved neckline, and then cut along the shape of the armhole as well, and you'll want to create that little pointed peak where the neckline and armhole meet like I am. You will need to cut extra fabric on the side for seam allowance, and since I'm using a non-stretch fabric, I had to make sure to add enough room to be able to get the top on and off. So I added about 1.5 inches on the side at the armhole, and then flared it out even more as I went down to create a looser fit. Although if you're using a stretch fabric, you may not need quite as much room. Then cut a 1/2 inch extra along the bottom edge for hem allowance. When you remove the tank top and unfold your fabric, you should have a shape that looks similar to this, and you'll use that to cut out a second identical piece of fabric to create front and back bodice pieces. Here I've zoomed in on one of the necklines and grabbed my bias tape. Open it up like so and set the bias tape down starting at one of the pointed edges at the beginning of your neckline, and place the raw edge of fabric inside the bias tape. Fold it back in half so that you've captured the neckline between the bias tape and pin it down. Wrap the next couple inches of bias tape around the next section of neckline and pin it down again, and continue this process around the entire neck. The bias tape goes around the curve fairly easily, but as you work it helps to smooth out the sections of bias tape with your finger and pin frequently so that it will lay flat and smooth around the entire curved neckline. Once you get it all pinned into place, sew the bias tape down to secure it using a standard needle and a straight stitch. Remove the pins as you go and always backstitch whenever you start and stop sewing, and since you're going around a curve, take your time. Trim the edges of the bias tape so that they line up with the armhole fabric, and then line the other bodice's neckline with bias tape exactly the same way. Decide how long you'll want the straps on your new tank top to be, and if you like the straps on your original tank top, you can measure them and use that size. Mine were 10.5 inches, although that's a bit too long for me, so I'm going to make my new straps 9 inches to fit better, and you'll use your strap length in just a minute. Lay one of your bodice pieces back out with the correct side facing up, and mine is laying sideways here. Open up your bias tape again, and starting at the bottom of one armhole, wrap it around the fabric and pin it down. Then continue covering the entire armhole with the bias tape, just like you did with the neckline. When you're done pinning, don't cut the bias tape because we're using it to make the straps. Measure out the distance you want your straps to be and mark that point with a pin. I've measured out 9 inches of bias tape for my 9-inch strap. Lay the other bodice piece down opposite the first, so they're basically mirror images of each other. Remove the pin from the bias tape and begin wrapping it at that point around the armhole of your other bodice piece. Cover the entire armhole with bias tape so that you'll have both armholes lined and then a strap connecting them in between. Sew along the entire length of bias tape to secure it, starting along one armhole, continuing across the strap, and then finishing up on the other armhole. Cut the edges of the bias tape so they line up evenly with the sides of your tank top. Head over to the opposite side and repeat that exact same process of wrapping the bias tape around one armhole, measuring out the distance for the strap, and then wrapping it around the other armhole. Sew to secure it and then trim the edges just like before. Lay one of the bodices with the correct side facing up and then lay the other bodice on top so that the correct sides face together. Line up the edges and then pin and sew along the sides using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I used a straight stitch, but if you're using stretch fabric, use a stretch or zigzag stitch and a ballpoint needle. To hem the bottom edge, turn the tank top wrong side out and fold the fabric over 1/4 inch once, then fold it again another 1/4 inch and pin it down. Continue double folding and pinning around the entire bottom edge, and when you get to the side seams, open up and flatten out the seam allowance before folding. When it's all pinned, sew to secure the hem, and before you wear it, you'll want to iron the tank top and all the bias tape so that everything lays nice and flat and you're all done with this tank top. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have an awesome and creative day. Let's go ahead and get sewing while this mosquito is biting my leg. Mosquitoes are everywhere, dang. A DIY, man, what I did. Why was I not focused? Focus, camera, focus. Tutorial. So, how many times can I say really in an introduction? Back up a little so you can't see all my sweat.